Hello, everyone. I want to share today on a topic that is of concern to many people during this time, our finances. I can identify with that concern as there's been many times over the years when I've worried about where my next paycheck would come from. I've been self-employed for most of my career, so there's been no real guarantees about my work or income. Even if your situation is more secure than mine has been, you will probably know someone whose job has been affected by this pandemic, and it's a real source of stress for them. During times when I've been worried, I usually turn to Matthew chapter 6 for the verses like this. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or shall we wear? But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Honestly, I've never worried much about what I would eat or drink. As a single guy, I was always good at mooching meals off my married friends, and I never have worried about what I would wear. My older sister Leslie would attest to the latter. When I started high school, she would often say to me, "You're not going to wear that shirt today, are you?" To which I would reply, "What? I like this shirt." She would then say something like, "Well, at least undo the top button," and I would say, "I like it done up." Her last attempts would usually end up with being something like, "You're going to look like such a nerd," or, "Well, just don't tell anyone that I'm your sister." Of course, she didn't realize that as a 14-year-old boy, I was fine with all that. But even though I have not worried about food, drink, or clothing while single, after getting married, I've done my fair share of worrying about paying the bills and just generally the future. One of these times of worrying was fairly recent. It started last summer and it continued until about a month ago. Last July, I had a meeting with my largest client. I'm an IT consultant in Guelph, and just before the meeting started, the managing partner pulled me aside for what he said was a quick talk. He asked if I was okay with my contract being done after we got started the next project, and that it would be done perhaps in 2 or 3 months. I was shocked. I'd been working for them for over 25 years, and as I understood it, I would be working for them for another 2 or 3 years as I helped them transition to a new IT company and prep for me semi-retiring. Before we could talk about it more, though, we had to get into the meeting as it was about to start. After the meeting, I asked to speak to him again, and I didn't know what to say. All I could think to say was, I did not see things rolling out like that. I had planned on a 2 or 3 year transition time, but there was no real response from him. All I could think of on the way home was how I was going to break it to Elaine. There was no way I could survive on my other clients who were much smaller, and we were not yet financially ready to retire. There were those around me back then, especially the Friday breakfast guys who I'll affectionately call the Bacon Club, who knew that this worried me a lot and that it was consuming my mind all the time. I did start looking for other jobs here and there. I wonder what would come of it, but nothing came out of searching for anything else. Over the years, there's been a few things that have helped me the most when I've been under times of financial stress. First one is sharing the burden with others and pray with them. There's an old saying that a burden shared is half the burden. I did this with a few of the guys from our group and also with those in our Marines group, and that helped a lot. It does help a lot. Secondly, I would go back to the scriptures and go over the verses about God's protection and care for us. Ones like Matthew 6:33, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. And Philippians 4:19, and my God will supply all of your needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. Also reading verses about God's wonderful care for us, as him as our Father. Ones like Psalm 23 I read about a month ago, and it was a real uplifter to me that day. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. The other thing that has helped a lot and is calling out to God when we're most desperate. Sometimes we have to get to the end of our rope in order to get past the polite prayers that we often say. This happened to Elaine and myself about a year and a half ago when we were trying to close our store in Port Elgin. It was right towards the end of our lease. Elaine was sick, and we still had some significant hurdles with the store, including a fair bit of fabric to sell and all the fixtures. 2 days before the store was supposed to close, I went to a local park and in desperation called out to God in a very loud and honest voice, saying he had to get us out of this mess. Time doesn't really allow me to go into all the details of how that transpired, but suffice to say that we were amazed at the prayers that came through in the next 2 days. So when we cry out in desperation, the Bible even encourages it. It says in 1 Peter 5:7, cast all your anxiety on him, for he cares for you. And I would say that casting is a very active verb. It's something, it's just about sort of like throwing our cares on God. And because it says he cares for you. So if you're in a rough situation right now, share the burden with some friends who can pray with you. Find verses that remind you of God's care and his provision. And finally, pray to God honestly about what you're feeling and what your needs are. I would say that this pandemic has also made me appreciate a whole lot more those who are up against a wall with no hope, and there are many of them. They need some real encouragement from us, empathy, and even some practical help if we can do that in any way. As far as the situation went with my largest client, this slowly worked itself out over the last 9 months. There was no big revelation that things were going to change, but just somehow the company seemed to change their mind, and they've now proposed work for the next year to 2 years. No guarantees, but it's what it is. I've also had to remember that God is ultimately our provider, and that because he cares for us deeply, he will always come through for us, and he will for you too.